Hi, I'm James Catherall, founder of Catherall Audio, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about Logic Remote. This is a free iPad app that pairs with Logic and allows you to control your Logic project from your iPad. What makes Logic Remote great is it essentially combines two different products into one. The first one is the Stream Deck, which gives you the ability to have shortcuts and macros pre-programmed that you can activate just by the push of one button, as well as a control surface, something like a Behringer X Touch or a Nano Control, where it gives you the ability to have faders and buttons and knobs that can control your Logic project. The only drawback between the two of those things is that this is a digital interface because it's an iPad. So you don't have physical buttons or faders or knobs or anything like that. It's all digital. So you don't really have that tactile ability that you would have with a Stream Deck or with a Behringer X Touch, where you can touch physical things. So it doesn't make it quite as quick because you can't just like not look and push buttons. You have to actually really look at the iPad and see what you're doing to make sure you're doing the right thing. With that said, I have my iPad right here. I'm going to be recording my screen so you can see everything that I'm doing, along with the pairing of my computer with my Logic project open. This does also have the ability to work with MainStage as well, and we'll get into that later in the video. First thing we're going to do is check out how it can work inside of Logic. For this video, I'm going to be using the demo project that comes with Logic, so it already has all the tracks and everything pre-laid out for us, so we can see all of the different functionality in Logic Remote. First thing that you'll need to do is connect your iPad to your computer. There's two different ways that you can do this. You can either connect it wirelessly via Wi-Fi, so they both need to be on the same network to be able to communicate with each other, or you can hardwire it like I'm doing right now. So I just have a Lightning to USB-C cable connecting my iPad to my Mac Studio. So if you're somewhere that doesn't have a great Wi-Fi connection, or you just don't have the ability to connect to Wi-Fi at all, you can always use either a USB-C cable or a Lightning cable, depending on which iPad you have, and then hardwire to your computer. Now, once you've done that, you'll go up here in Logic Remote at the top right where you see this gear. I'm going to tap on that, and then down towards the middle, you can see it says James's Mac Studio and it has a check mark. That means that I'm connected. I can tap on that and then tap here to connect. It's going to load for a bit. You may get a pop-up on your computer that's going to ask if you want to allow this iPad to connect, and then you can hit yes, just as a little bit of a warning to know that someone's trying to gain access to your computer and to your Logic project. Now that we're connected, what we're looking at right now is the volume page of Logic Remote. This gives me access to all of my different tracks with all of my different faders. So I can see the track name, number, and color along the bottom, and I can scroll through this by dragging with my finger. You can move a fader by clicking and dragging it up and down, or you can double tap it to reset it back to its default state. Above that, we have the mute button, a solo button, and then you can arm the track to record by pushing that R up there, which for this track, it didn't like that because it wasn't in an audio input track, but I can do that for any other type of audio input. If I go maybe, I don't know, let's try here. There we go. And now it arms it to record. And then next to that is the automation. So you can click on that to change the automation mode to off, or any of the other ones that come with Logic. And then above that, if I want to navigate through my tracks quickly, I can look at this area above that and it shows me all of my tracks. So this one has quite a few tracks, and I have this sort of light gray square that shows me where I'm looking. So I can tap anywhere to make this jump around, or I can click and drag it to show different tracks in my projects. And then above that, if I want to select different tracks, I can also do that up here in the top middle. I have these arrows on the left and right, and I can use those to move from one track to the next in sequential order. And then to the left of that, I can actually play my project by pushing this play button. And then if I want to stop it, I just push the stop button next to it. And then I can also push the button to the left of that to return back to the beginning. You'll also notice that anything you do in Logic Remote is instantly reflected in your Logic project. So anything from highlighting a different track, or by moving a fader, I can highlight different tracks here, or by pushing play and stop, it's going to instantly reflect in my Logic project. If I go above that, this is my playhead up at the top. So if I tap that, you'll see that it then shows the grid in your project. And you can move around it by clicking and dragging with your finger, and that'll move through the project. And once again, it'll move that playhead on your Logic project on your computer. And then you can play from there, and you'll notice that it instantly starts playing. On the other side, I have my cycle button, if you want to turn on the cycle in the project, or the click to be able to turn that on and off. We also have the effects right here, which will look really similar if you're familiar with GarageBand and you've seen this on the iPad, is it's that similar layout of effects that you get in GarageBand. And then let's go down from there. On the far right side, we have our master fader. And just remember the difference between the master fader and the stereo output of your track. Your master fader is kind of outside of all of that stuff. You can't put any effects or anything. It's just sort of like the highest global volume of Logic Pro. Next to that, we have a few different buttons. Right now we're on the volume. I can also go up to the pan and volume, and that shortens the fader and adds the pan knob for each of my tracks. So the difference between these, if I want to have a little bit more length on those faders, if I'm really trying to dial in something at a really finite small detail, I can use this fader view to have a little bit more room on my faders. Above that are our sends, so I can see all the sends for our different tracks. If I drag around somewhere else where I see a few more sends, these are all my knobs, and once again I can click and drag these to move them around, or I can click an empty space if I want to add a new send to this track. Above that are our audio effects, our I/O, and our MIDI effects. So these are all relatively similar in that they give you access to these plugins that are in your Logic project. And kind of like to varying degree of how useful they are, the channel EQ is really nice. If I click that and I click open plugin, this gives me a full view of the channel EQ exactly like it looks in Logic. So I can click and drag these around and affect that EQ for that track and do all kinds of different things. You can go back. Most of the other ones don't look nearly as nice as the channel EQ just did. If I tap on tape delay, this is what most of the other ones are going to look like. It's just a lot of words and faders and buttons and things. So it's not really a super clean graphic user interface. It's just a lot of stuff. So if you do want to do it from here and you know exactly what you're looking for, then you can do that here. But it's not the cleanest or the nicest way to mess with your plugins in your Logic project. And then same thing for I/O. This is going to show you your inputs or your software instruments. And same thing for MIDI effects, and most of them will look the same way. It'll just be a lot of words and faders and buttons without a clean graphic user interface to combine all of it together. And that's the volume page of Logic Remote. So that's only one page. We're going to go through the other ones, but the volume page can be really useful because this is what gives you that control surface type of ability inside of your Logic project. So this would be something that's really similar to a Behringer X-Touch or a Nano Control 2, is it allows you to use the faders and the knobs to do different things instantly in your Logic project. It can also be really useful if you have maybe like an artist or a talent or a producer or anyone else in the room with you, and you can hand them this iPad and so they can do stuff with you in tandem. So you're sitting at your main desk with your Logic project on your computer and you're kind of doing your thing, and they can also either be sitting next to you or on the couch behind you, and you guys can be listening together and they can do things as well without just having to tell you to do everything. As maybe they want to hear the vocals a little bit louder, or maybe they want to mute a certain track really quick, or they want to jump somewhere different in the track really quick, because they can do those things quickly and push play and hear something. So it allows you just to maybe work a little bit quicker together as you're collaborating on a project. From there, let's look at some of the other pages in Logic Remote. If I want to get somewhere else, I can look up here at the top left where I have this disclosure triangle. I'm going to tap on that. And I'm going to go to one of the other ones that I think is the most useful in Logic Remote, and that's the key commands. So this is what's going to be really similar to the Stream Deck. I have a full page of buttons here that are all shortcuts, and I can tap these to instantly do something in my Logic project. So like pretty straightforward, I have play and I have stop. You also have forward, which is going to jump by 1 bar. So you can see every time I push forward, we go 1 bar forward, or rewind goes 1 bar back. I can do fast forward, which goes by 8 bars at a time. And then I have a whole bunch of other things. I can add a new audio track. If I click that, you can see it just added a new audio track into my Logic project. I can even undo that. Here we go, and it gets rid of that I just added. You can save from here. You can do a whole bunch of things. And what's even better is it's not just this one page. If you see here, there's a couple circles. This shows me all of the different pages of buttons that I have. So I can scroll through these. And if I keep going, we'll start seeing some of these empty squares. And then finally, the last page is a full empty grid where you can add anything that you want. So if I tap a square, I now get this huge menu. There's all kinds of things that you can do. You can see this is just the first level, and then I tap on things and then it keeps going. And there's all kinds of stuff that I can add to these key commands. And then at the bottom of this, I have colors. So you can color code them as well, so you can quickly identify what types of things those buttons are going to do. And then also on top of that, because there's so many of them, if you know something that you want to get to, you can also just type search up here and then enter in whatever you want. Like maybe if I do want to quickly add undo, then I have undo right there, delete undo history, all kinds of different things. So if I know I want an undo button, I could just type it in and then it'll put it right there. I would say that's one of the best uses of Logic Remote. If you're just like a solo person doing it on your own in your own studio, you can have your iPad set up next to you and you can have this open to have some really quick access to key commands in your Logic project. So you don't always have to be doing a bunch of like keyboard shortcuts on your keyboard, and you don't have to do a whole bunch of clicking around on your computer. You can just quickly tap a button and get it to do something inside of your Logic project. Now, let's keep looking from there. There's a few more pages. Most of them aren't nearly as useful as those two, but they're still there if we want to do something with them. So I have the smart controls right here. So if the track you're highlighting has some type of smart controls, this is where it'll pop up, and you can do this to reflect into your Logic project. So I can go here and I'll click some different ones, and you'll kind of notice some of them have smart controls just depending on what it is, and some of them don't. Just depends on which track you have highlighted, and it'll give you some parameters. That's all the smart controls if you're familiar with how those work inside of Logic. Next one from there, we're gonna go to the chord strips. This is another one that you're probably familiar with if you've used GarageBand on your iPad. It just gives you different chord strips. So if you want to play chords, right now I'm on a mono instrument, so it's not playing chords, it's just playing individual notes. But that's there, and then up here at the top left, you have this sustain lock, where you can push that and it's going to sustain that note as you touch it. Going from there, we have our live loops, which is another area that's kind of a newer addition to Logic. So here's another great space. If you do a lot of live looping stuff in Logic, here's where you'd want to mess with all of that. We have a step sequencer, similar kind of thing that's going to allow you to do some step sequencing inside of Logic. And then from there at the bottom is the help, which this is essentially just like the user guide for Logic Pro. So you can quickly navigate to any different things. If you want to look up something in the user guide or the manual, this is where you'd find it. So that's just sort of the basic rundown of how all of this works when you're connecting Logic Remote to your computer. I would say for the best experience, you're going to want to hardwire it just so you don't have to worry about Wi-Fi and getting connected or disconnected. You just have a hardwire if you're working in your studio and you're just using it by yourself. And then you can use that Wi-Fi if you do have someone else in the room with you and you're collaborating on a project. It also makes a great use to be able to have them use the iPad so you don't have to both like fight over a single mouse or keyboard. Or you don't have to explain everything to each other. You can just have one person with an iPad and one person sitting at the computer. And once again, quick reminder on it is that it is free. If you have an iPad, just go into the App Store and type in Logic Remote, and this will pop up and you can download it and start using it with your computer. All right, now let's take a look at using MainStage with Logic Remote. Both of these still work with each other. Even though it's called Logic Remote, you can also use it with MainStage, and it can act in two different ways. You can use this as a quick navigator for MainStage if maybe you have your computer off stage or your computer somewhere else. You can use Logic Remote to navigate through your concert while you're performing live. So you can use it to jump around to different patches, or maybe do a quick little bit of mixing if you're in a different venue and you know that something's a little bit too loud. You can use this to do a little bit of mixing. Or you can also use it as maybe something like a front of house mixer, where they can have the iPad connected to the computer and they're sitting out in the front of house, and they can also dial in just the MainStage concert. So different faders and different volumes, and dial it in that way. I'm using the keyboard quick start template in MainStage just so we have something to work off of and we can see how it works in Logic Remote. I'm going to connect it in a similar way that we talked about previously, but if you're just jumping to this section, I have a USB cable connected to my computer via Lightning to USB-C, or you can use Wi-Fi if you want. You just need to make sure they're both on the same Wi-Fi network, and then you can connect. I'll go up here to the top right where I see the gear, and then you should see your computer, or if you're opening it up for the first time, you'll get a drop-down menu. and it should look similar to what just popped up right now. And then I'm going to click on the name of my computer that I want to control, and now I'm connected. So this is the main volume view. This shows me all of the faders for the patch that I'm currently on. I can click on volume to have a little bit more room with those faders, and I can pull these up and down, and you'll see as soon as I do that, it also instantly reflects that in the MainStage concert. So I can pull these up or down, and then I can double tap to reset them back to where they were. I have a mute button, and I have a solo button. I have all of my channel strips down at the bottom. You can see the names and the colors of those channel strips. And if I want to move to different patches, I can do that up here at the top in the middle. So this is showing me what patch I'm on and the name of it, as well as the set. So the set is the top picks. And then the name of this patch is Steinway Grand Piano, and this is patch number 1. And I can move through them by clicking on these arrows. You can see as I'm doing that, when I move around, the channel strips do kind of pop in and out. So that's one of the things that makes it not the easiest to use if you're a front of house mixer, depending on how many patches are happening. As the person is changing patches, it's going to instantly disappear and move to the next thing. So if you're messing with a fader or doing something, and then the person at the computer changes patches, it instantly jumps to the next thing. So obviously it'll save it and it'll keep it because of how MainStage operates, but it can be a little bit difficult to navigate quickly if all of a sudden you have like 16 channel strips on one thing and then it jumps and it only has one, or if it's going the other way. If you're working on one channel strip on one patch and then you go to the next patch and it has like 20 and you need to scroll to something quickly, it gets a little bit difficult. But it is possible if that's something that you want to do when you're front of house mixing the MainStage concert. Besides the volume and the pan in volume, we also have our sends right here. So these are all of my different aux sends on my channel strips. And if I want to add one, I can just tap an empty circle and then add any type of send that I want. And then on the far right, we have our master fader. And we just want to remember the difference between the master fader and the stereo output fader in your MainStage concert. The master is usually one that you never want to touch in MainStage because it's going to affect everything and the entire overall volume of your entire concert. No matter how many outputs you're using, no matter what's happening, this is going to affect everything together. And this is the channel strip that you can't put any plugins on or anything like that. It's just a fader. So usually you want to leave this in its default state at 0 or unity. And then you'll have your main outputs next to that. That's really what you want to mess with right here, is the output 1, 2. Moving on from there, if I look at the top left, I can see the MainStage logo, which is sort of that silhouette of the guy playing guitar. If I tap on that, this also gives me a little bit easier navigation of my patch list. So instead of just moving through them chronologically from top to bottom, you can jump around anywhere you want. So like on this keyboard template, we have a whole bunch of different sets with a whole bunch of different patches. So as I tap on these, then I can move around and get to anywhere I want. So instead of having to like quickly jump around to all kinds of different things, I could just tap something and then I can tap on a patch and instantly jump to that patch. So that can be useful if you are using a computer that's maybe off stage or isn't next to you. You can use this iPad to navigate through all of your different patches. Now let's look at a couple different pages, because this was just the main view of all our channel strips and all of our patches. If I click the top left where I have this disclosure triangle, we'll see a few different views. I'm going to go to the other one that I think is really useful, and that's the key commands. So when I go here, this is going to be a really similar function to something like a Stream Deck, which gives you those buttons that you can press to instantly do keyboard shortcuts or any other type of macros. You can also have that here with Logic Remote. So what I'm looking at right now is what's already been populated for me, but I have some empty squares. And if I tap on those, I can add more key commands with all of these different options. And there's a lot of different ones. And if there's something you know that you want to add, but you can't really find it, you can also use this search function. So maybe if I want like an undo button, I can tap that. And then let's make it gray. So you can color code it and you can search through all these functions and add new things. So this is really great. Even if you do have your computer right next to you, this can make it easy to have some quick access to key commands without having to memorize a bunch of stuff or click around your concert. You can just use it on your iPad right next to you. And then let's go to the other pages. Not quite as useful, but still there if you do want to use them. If I go up here to where it says Smart Controls and Keyboard, I get the smart controls if you're familiar with those in MainStage and Logic. If the patch that you're on and the channel strip you have highlighted has smart controls, this is where those would show up. You also get a keyboard, so this does allow you to trigger sounds in your concert from your iPad. You see right here, I'm tapping this keyboard. So you have a few different options with this keyboard. The far left is octave transposition. So as I jump up and down, this is going to go up and down by octaves. And next to that, I have a sustain lock. So if I slide it over to lock, and then I press a key, it's going to sustain until I turn it off, and then it stops sustaining. In the middle, it shows you how the keyboard's going to behave when you tap your finger and then drag it around the keyboard. So right now it's set to glissando. So if I tap a key and drag up and down, it's going to glissando up and down those keys. But if I drag this to the right, now it's going to go to scroll. So if I tap my finger and then drag, it's going to scroll up and down the keyboard. So this could be a smaller amount of transposition. Rather than going up and down by octaves, you can go up and down by just a few steps to get to different keys. So if you don't want it to necessarily go from C to C, you can drag around and have your lowest key be an F. And then finally, you have pitch. So now if I click a key, you can notice as I go up and down, it's dragging that pitch side to side. Also, if you pull up, it kind of modulates the sound a little bit. And then to the far right of that, we can change the size of the keyboard. So I can choose bigger keys, but less of them, or I can choose smaller keys, but having more displayed. And then if we keep going from there, back to the disclosure triangle, I'm going to look at the chord strips. So this will probably look familiar if you've used GarageBand on the iPad before. This is how you can play different types of chords. If I click these, it's going to instantly play that chord that's highlighted there. And you can just do different types of the chords using these chord strips, similar to how it functions in GarageBand. And then last one, if I go back to the triangle and I click Smart Help, this is essentially just giving you access to the user guide or the manual for MainStage, so you can have access to it on your iPad. So that's just a bit of a dive into Logic Remote and how you can use it with MainStage and with Logic Pro. So if you have an iPad, I would highly suggest going to the App Store and downloading Logic Remote for free and being able to see how it can affect and help your workflow. I think for me, one of the best features of it is that key command page, so that you can have quick access to shortcuts and you don't have to memorize a whole bunch of key commands or like click around your MainStage concert or click around your Logic Pro project. You can just have access to a bunch of key commands right there, really quick and really easy. I would suggest not using this as a front of house mixing option for MainStage. I think for the reasons I talked about before, with how the channel strips appear and disappear really quickly and how all that kind of stuff happens, it's not really a great option as a front of house mixing device. And also in my experience, it doesn't really have the best or strongest Wi-Fi connection to a computer. I experience a lot of dropouts when I'm trying to use Logic Remote with my computer via Wi-Fi. And then I think the other great option is being able to have that iPad to pass off to somebody. If you're both working in the same studio, you can both be collaborating on the same Logic project and not having to fight over a single mouse or a single keyboard to be able to make changes and navigate through a project. That's it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful. If you made it this far, I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.